Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Help Desk webinar for the series. My name is Ami Sherson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the project manager at Arts Business Collaborative. We are excited to kick off the Arts Business Collaborative Help Desk program, an 8-week-long series designed to provide strategy and organizational recovery webinars, office hours, and individualized pro bono consulting for organizations and small businesses led by and serving communities of color. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Arts Business Collaborative YouTube channel by next week. If you have any questions in the meantime or during the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll have time at the end to go through them. This year's Help Desk is brought to you with thanks to the M&T Charitable Foundation, Hill Capital Partners, Amalgamated Bank, and Empire State Development Corporation. If you're interested in applying for the ESD Small Businesses Pandemic Relief Grant, ABC provides free technical support. You can learn more information and connect with us by either private messaging me or emailing services@artsbusinesscollaborative.org. I'm now excited to pass things off to Shadana Texidor, who will be leading this presentation on personnel policies after the pandemic. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shadana Texidor, as Ami said, and just a quick intro about myself before I start the presentation. I am the HR consultant for Arts Business Collaborative. Just a bit of background, I've been doing HR for almost 25 years now, and I do hold a regular full-time position running HR for a media organization. So I do a little bit of everything from employee relations to benefits administration, policies, handbook creation, union relations, all of that. And today we'll talk a little bit about the policies that you can think through for post-pandemic. So Ami will actually be doing my presenting for me as I go through the presentation. So I'll start with something to ponder, which is, will your employees be returning to the office, right? That's the big question right now that all of the companies are thinking about right about now, whether they're small or large organizations. You can go to the next slide, Ami. This is what people are thinking about. And right now, you have to make some decisions, if you haven't already, for your organization about whether or not you're going to be making them return to the office now or even in the near future. And if the answer is yes, then the next thing that has to be done is policies need to be created to ensure a safe return to the office for your employees. If the answer is no, they will not be returning to the office. There's still policies that need to be created to ensure that the employees are set up properly at home to be able to work from home successfully and efficiently, as if they were still in the office. And then, of course, if the answer is both, that there will be some in-office and at-home work, so a hybrid situation, a combination of both, there are also policies that need to be created to ensure the success of employees working from home and working from the office. And I'll take you through some of the policies that I'm recommending should be created for each of these scenarios. So in-office work policies. So if your employees are returning to the office, there are 3 policies I'd recommend creating. One of them is the return to office policy. The return to office policy will typically cover rules of returning to the office. So it'll address things like safety protocols that will be in place, typically based off of CDC guidelines and OSHA guidelines for keeping the office sanitized, if there will be social distancing required, if masks will be mandatory in the office, if there are going to be new meeting room rules, new common area rules, like for the pantry or cafeteria. Those are things to think about. And also, even if your building has specific rules and guidelines that are separate from your actual office guidelines. And then what happens if an employee gets COVID and was in the office and exposed everyone? So return to office policies kind of have to really incorporate a little bit of all of those things. And in doing that, that will make, your back to office and return to office successful when you actually go through and make sure that all of those pieces are covered off on. Something else that you would need to address is a vaccination policy, which is a big deal right now. That addresses whether you're going to mandate employees to actually be vaccinated in order to come into the office, or will you do mandating weekly negative COVID tests, as some places are deciding on? Will you require proof of vaccination? You know, who will be tracking the vaccination proof that they're providing for you? And will you be allowing unvaccinated employees into the office? And if so, what does that look like for those that are vaccinated and not vaccinated in terms of things like retaliation or poor behavior towards somebody that a coworker that may not be vaccinated? These are all things that you have to consider when you're thinking about the return to office policies and the vaccination policy. And the other part of that to think about is a flexible work policy. And a flexible work policy provides employees with increased flexibility with their work schedule and still maintaining a productive work environment, right? So it helps employees face demands of juggling work, family, and personal obligations by offering additional options to them. So it's used typically for employees who are parents or or caregivers, and they would need to leave early to pick up their children if they are returning to the office, or if they're a caregiver and they need to be home to take care of someone. Some of the things that a flexible work policy will allow, it allows an employee to request flexible working hours or changing their in-office dates, changing the number of days that are required in the office. Those are some of the options that they may ask for. And usually what will happen is the manager of the employee as well as HR will review the request and make decisions based on the impact of the department to the organization and the workload of their coworkers, financial implications. Those are all things that have to be considered in things like a flexible work policy. I'll stop now before I move on and say if anyone has any questions they can ask, because I know that was a lot to take in. And just so everyone is aware, these are all policies that I've created and put in place myself. So if you have specific questions, you can definitely let me know that as well. The other thing to mention right now, which is a big issue, is making vaccinations a condition of returning to work, like a actual employment condition. So you can actually legally mandate employees to get vaccinated as a condition of their employment, which means that if they choose not to and you're making that mandatory, they can be fired for it legally. So there are very few companies out there that are taking that very hard line right now with making it a condition of employment. There are definitely a lot of organizations that are making it mandatory if people are returning to the office. If there aren't any questions, I will continue on.
So Shadana, do you mind if I interject with a question?
Absolutely, of course.
So if organizations require vaccination or proof of vaccination, or are asking folks to provide a negative test each week or something, let's say that let's talk about the negative test. Is that test part of the cost of the organization, or who would accrue that cost?
Right, so there's two ways that it could be addressed. One, there are organizations that are actually paying for employees to get their testing done so that they can bring it in and come to the office. The other way is that if you provide benefits for the employees in your organization, typically their benefits plans they're going to pay for them to get their testing done without the organization having to put out more resources financially. But that is something that every company will have to determine and make decisions on. If they have benefits, then you may not need to provide anything additional for an employee to make sure that they actually get you a negative test result every week. And if you don't have those things in place, like benefits for the employee, then you would need to actually provide them with some kind of financial support to go and get a negative COVID test every week for them to be able to return to the office.
Great, thank you so much, Shadana.
So I'll move on to work from home policies. So If employees will be working from home and not returning to the office, which honestly, there are a lot of companies nowadays that are actually doing that, there are a couple of policies I'd recommend be created. One is a remote working policy, and that policy addresses what the expectations are of the employees working from home. It also addresses reimbursement for things like internet usage and guidance on obtaining office supplies, including things like a desk, a chair, monitor, wireless mouse, etc. Um, Basically, anything an employee would need to successfully work from home, as if they were actually in the office, an organization should be trying to provide for them. If we are saying to them that they're no longer required to come to the office, but we're actually still requiring to do everything that they needed to do at home that they would do in the office. So we have to provide a little bit extra for them in these instances, right? So those are things that, it's the organization's responsibility to ensure that we're setting the employees up successfully to actually do remote working. Okay. And something additional to that is a mobile device policy. And a mobile device policy doesn't just address a cell phone. It's iPads, it's laptops, it is if somebody chooses to use their personal phone for work related things while they're working from home, reimbursing them for a portion of that expense as well. And if they need things like a laptop or an iPad, or they want a work cell phone, and that's an option that the organization is providing, those are things that the organization should be giving to them if it's going to help them successfully do their job at home the same way that they did it in the office. So it addresses reimbursements, but it also addresses reimbursement of things like internet usage and personal cell phones and the amount that they can reimburse, and usually the process of what they have to go through to get the reimbursement done for that to happen. Any questions about these two policies? Okay, I'll move on to the last area. So if there is a combination of in-office work and working from home, you'll see listed here all of the policies that I've already talked about, plus a hybrid work policy. So there are many companies that are doing a combination of in-office work and working from home, whether it's 2 days in the office and 3 days at home, or going in as a team on one day and still being able to work from home. So a hybrid work policy would be recommended, that would be created, and it addresses what is expected while you're working from the office, as well as what is expected of you while you're working from home. For example, if you're saying that people have to come into the office, typically you would want them to focus on doing in-person meetings with other teams or other team members that they would not normally be able to do in person. And then when they're working from home, do the work that comes out of those meetings versus using the office to do the work in. So every organization and the leaders of the organization have to make decisions on what they want that hybrid work policy to look like. It could be that it also addresses specific days that they're going to be required to work in the office. It will also talk about when they're working from home, using that time less to do meetings, but more to do actual work. And it will incorporate essential pieces of all of those policies that I've already talked about. The other thing that we have to remember is these policies are policies that have to be reviewed regularly, because as we all know, with everything happening right now with the pandemic, things are changing rapidly. So, you can make a policy today and a week later, you're going to have to re-look at it to make sure that you're still living up to the guidelines and the things that are out there relevant to the CDC guidelines and relevant to OSHA, making sure that you're still following the rules that should be followed to make sure that you protect the employees. Because ideally, that's what the bottom line is. If you're having them come back into the office in some capacity, you want to make sure that as an organization and as leaders that you're protecting them as much as you possibly could, the same way that you were doing for them when there was no pandemic. There's going to be a lot of anxiety from your employees about returning to the office if you have them coming in. There will be people who don't want to come in, even if you are saying that you have to come in some facet. So you have to be ready for what is that situation going to look like for you. And that's where things like the flexible work policy will come into place, and maybe giving them a little bit more flexibility to work from home. Maybe if you're mandating 2 days in the office, maybe that person only gets to do 1 day in the office, but it needs to be taken on a case by case basis when you're making those decisions, and you're not necessarily making decisions for everybody. Everybody's handling this whole thing differently. Some people are ready to get back in the office because they love that environment of being together with their coworkers and their teammates, especially after, over a year, going on a year and a half of not being in the office, or not being in the office steadily like we were before the pandemic hit. And some people are perfectly fine working from home. So it is the balance that you have to figure out what is best for your actual company as well as your employees. And it's a hard balance as leaders and people who run organizations to make decisions on this, where you're still making sure that you're protecting your employees at all costs. So those are things that you should really think through. And I'll finish with a couple of key takeaways when you're creating the policies. If you can go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, there we go. So when creating the policies, ensure that you're doing what is best for the employees, which I just talked about, but also the business, because there are some organizations that you need people to be in. And with that, you have to then make sure that when you ask employees to return to work, that you're doing the best that you possibly can to keep them protected. Because they'll be way loyal to you, and they will do more for you if you're making sure and they feel that you're doing the best for them at that point. When creating those policies, you got to make sure that you use updated resources like CDC for guidelines, which I talked about. And always, this is the last and bigger thing, make sure that you get some legal advisement before sharing them with staff. So when you actually do create all your policies, you should have some legal person or an attorney look at them to make sure that there's no legal implications for anything that you're actually trying to do. And also that they can give you some advice, which sometimes it's things that you don't think about, even in how you're positioning it to the employees. So you could be saying that you are mandating employees to return to the office, and an attorney can tell you, well, instead of you just saying we're making it mandatory, you can say you're giving them a choice. So it's the choice is, if you're returning to the office, that either you're vaccinated and show proof, or you choose to do a weekly negative COVID test. So it takes it away from you as an organization and as leaders, that you're forcing something on them and you're giving the employee the choice of which way they want to go. So attorneys are good for giving you like a different way to think about things, where it doesn't become so harsh and all the liability makes it seem like you as the company and the leaders are making really, really hard decisions that employees, and they want to have some kind of, decision making in this process as well. So I think that's a huge thing, is to, at the end of making all of these policies or any of these policies, you should definitely have someone legal look into it. Any questions? So I'll say, if you have any questions or if you need assistance or advice, do not hesitate to reach out to me. My email is here. Yes.
Do you have template policies that you could share?
I don't have template policies I could share, but I definitely, if you want, we can get on a call and I can give you some advice on how to get them situated, because a lot of it is relevant to each particular organization and how that organization is functions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I also want to add that participants of the help desk program are available and open to participate for up to 1 hour of pro bono consultation. So if you'd like to have these conversations with Shadana, you can actually sign up on the ABC website. I'm happy to follow up and send you more information about that, but you can get free pro bono consulting from Shadana about this as well.
Any other questions?
So Shadana, this is Ami again. I have a lot of questions
No
for
way.
you.
Of course.
So in the beginning of the year, a lot of organizations were thinking that we were going to be fully in person if they were already in person by September, right? And then the Delta variant came.
Correct.
So a lot of organizations needed to look back at their policies and really think of timely ways to protect their employees and their organization.
Yes.
How often do you suggest organizations and companies review their policies, and how does one also take their employees' needs into considerations as well?
Honestly, because things are changing so rapidly, meaning sometimes it's weekly that there's changes on things, it's something that I'd suggest if you, I don't know how big or the organizations are that you all are a part of, but if you have an organization where there's a couple of people who could be on a task force, they need to meet regularly. In my company that I'm part of, we meet every week regarding this stuff because that's how quickly these things are changing, and we're making decisions every week on what we're doing and how we're moving forward. So the hard part too is you make a policy and then the next week you have to change it or update it or make some adjustment to it, and even make real tough decisions for employees, right? So that's something that I think that you have to really take into consideration when you are making these hard decisions. But the Delta variant really kind of kicked a lot of employees in the butt because they were ready to go back in September and even October. And now a lot of them, including my company, we're going back in we're talking about January right now. So it definitely is a change. And that's the hard part is you think that when one thing is settled up, that all of a sudden something comes and it's different. And you have to stay on top of like what's happening regularly. I mean, easily you have to check in weekly on different websites, whether it's CDC, whether it's OSHA, whether it's legal counsel. Like you have to make sure that you get the updated information so you can make better decisions for the employees. And first and foremost, without employees, there's no company, if you think about it, right? So you had, like, to me, it's always like, what are we doing for, the question should always be as leaders, what are we doing for the best thing for the employees, right? If you can answer that question and wholeheartedly feel like the decisions you're making for them are best for them, you're doing the right thing. If you feel like those are not, and you're just making it because the business needs need it, without them, there's no business. So you have to start with the employees and know that when you make the right decisions for them, everything else will follow in terms of making sure that the business will still be running. Like in my organization, we did the best sales wise while we were in the pandemic. We had the best journalism while we were in the pandemic. So we thought people would really sit back and not really take it seriously and like slack off. They did the quite opposite. So when you think that your employees aren't loving the fact that you're making sure that they're taken care of, they do love that, and they will actually be better for you.
Great,
Kat, I see you had a hand up.
Yes, I have to comment. So, you mentioned that there are some people who are missing their colleagues and want to have that sort of environment of, being working with people. I'm
Sure.
wondering how you suggest people who had that kind of a in-person workplace continue to develop their culture and maintain their culture during a remote work situation.
So this is a challenge, definitely, that I know I faced. And one thing we tried to do and push heavily in the beginning of the pandemic was teams making sure that they would have like virtual lunches together, since you couldn't have in-person lunches, or happy hours virtually, and some managers decided they would send everybody a bottle of wine, and they would have a happy hour or a game night, as an organization and teams against teams. So things that, would still keep the camaraderie going. And when it was safe for people to actually meet in person, teams did do that. Not at the office, they did it, they did social meetings so that they could still maintain the bonds and relationships that they have. And I think that is something that, you want to make sure that you keep happening. But I will tell you, the challenge is people get tired of doing it so much, right? So then it kind of falls off the map. And they really, for me, I've realized they just want the in-person meeting of their people, whether it's in the office or whether it's like, oh, we're going to just all get together as a team and go out and have a drink or have dinner or something. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but they still take the proper precautions. They still mask up if they need to, they still, make sure that they're vaccinated if that's what the group has decided amongst themselves to do. But you have to encourage it and give them a little leeway, if, as leaders, give them a budget so that they can do something with their team. Because you don't want somebody to feel like, oh my God, I have to take this out of my pocket and I don't want to do this because I have to do that. You still want to be able to kind of give a little bit as an organization to say, you know what, yes, take your team out. And I did that. And my team is me and one other person. And I took her out to dinner. I mean, we went to an in-person dinner early on in the pandemic when it was safe. We went to a dinner in person, and it felt better to not just be over this computer screen.
And we
Yeah,
have,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you were sorry to answer the question right as I had typed it into the chat, about like budgeting and like how the company can support this and like what sort of planning. I mean, I'm also wondering about like, if you want to encourage people to meet safely, to maintain those relationships, like, do you send employees PPE? Do you and like, is there a reimbursement policy for like the meetings, maybe for dinner? And like you said, like there was a budget, but just sort of like really digging more into like the development, like the maintaining of the relationships.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can do that. And I work for a news organization, so we do it for our journalists who we're sending out into the world to go do their reporting, right? And we make sure that they're masked up. We make sure that they do not see see the people that they're talking to inside. So it's always outside. It's, it's always 6 feet up. It's still, even with all of the precautions that we have and people being vaccinated, we still have rules and guidelines for them that they still have to follow. And we provide them with masks, and we provide with hand sanitizers, and we provide them with those kind of things that we think that they need in order to be safe when we send them out into the world. So you definitely can do that. And we made sure that we had masks for everyone if everyone was going to come back into the office, hand sanitizer, this and that. Like, we made sure that everybody had enough of everything. And so you can do that. You can, and this is the time where, unfortunately, sometimes you have to hit your budget and you didn't expect to have to use your budget for this. But this is the time that is the most crucial, because your employees are your most vital thing as an organization. Without them, you don't have a company. So you definitely can do it. Any other questions?
I have another question. I'm sorry,
but
I don't know if Ami
don't say sorry.
Okay. I'm also wondering about the kind of relationships that people have with their supervisors during this time. I at the very beginning, it was kind of interesting to me when it felt like, particularly like white managers were very concerned about not being able to like oversee their like lower level people of color, usually, because that's how it happens, is like the associates and whatever are like lower level, and they were freaking out about like, oh no, like how are we making sure that they're working? And I'm not saying that this is always the case, but structural racism is structural racism. But so we have to acknowledge the racial aspect of this. But in any case, it's like, how, I wonder how people have mitigated that, of like oversight and checking in and whatever else it is that created some of that anxiety. I know that there were some groups that had like literal like technology installed on their computer to be like, are you working, kind of thing. So
I mean, honestly, from my perspective, if you have to do that, no matter the color, race, whatever, they're just talking about leaders in general in a company. If you have to do that, then do you really need your employees? And because you didn't do that when they were in the office. So if you didn't do it in the office, why do you normally assume that they're going to do something different when they're home? You have to let them prove you wrong or right? So I will say my old CEO was very much that person. She was never into working from home. And when we went out on this pandemic, she was kind of already in one of the, and she just thinks that when she can't see you, you're not working. And so she would, even leaders, she wouldn't let me work from home unless it was like an ad hoc thing. I'm running HR. Like, how you think I'm not going to be working? And she realized that she couldn't think that anymore because everybody did so well when they worked from home. They did probably better than when they were working in the office. And they just acted like they were working and they may be BSing, right? People were really excelling working from home. They were putting so much more effort to make sure that they were doing the things that they were supposed to be doing. And they did the best. Our sales team did the best. You know, our journalism was so great. We really did well when we were working from home, and she had to eat that. And she was like, I admit, people working from home actually do work. Like, this is like, we've done the best that we possibly could be. We were holding down the organization, making the money for them. So you, as leaders though, you have to be open to admit that you are wrong in something like that. And if you have to put spyware on people's computers to determine if they're working, then you need to question yourself as a leader, number one, and you need to question whether these are the right employees if you have to do that. But it's you first. Like, it's got to be introspective. Why do you assume because they're working from home, they're not going to be working? Unless they prove to you that they're not working. Then that's a different story. And there's different conversations that can be had about that. But to do that automatically because someone's working from home, like, they're working from home, especially in the early parts of the pandemic, we couldn't even go out. So what do you have to do but work? You couldn't go out into the city. You couldn't go out driving. If you went out, there was nobody on the roads. There was no, like, so what were you doing besides working? Like, so to me, it was a time that it proved some of those kind of leaders wrong, because I know in my company it definitely did. But if you have to do that, you need to question yourself and you need to question your people and let them prove to you that they're not working before you do something like that. That to me is like, and don't do that without letting them know. Like, you need to have a conversation. To me, it's a chat about, so I see that you're not as productive. Let's talk about it. Because maybe it's something that they're going through because of the pandemic. Maybe it's they have a people at home that they have to care for now. Their kids are home because they weren't going to school. Like, all these other factors that could impact why they're not working to the productivity level that you anticipated that they were working at when they were in the office. And you need to be okay with it. Like, this is like a time that was like no other time. We haven't experienced stuff like this in eons in the world. And for us to be going through this in 2020 and 2021 and right on into 2022 and not seeing a sign of it stopping, we cannot think that people's personal lives and how this is happening to them is not impactful. People were dying. You don't know what they're doing, dealing with at home. Like, you have to give them some grace. You have to be okay with, oh my God, they're home with the kids, they're home with themselves. Like, they have to do everything. They don't have a way, they have to cook and still clean and do everything and then still work. Like, give them some grace. It's not that, like, would you rather them not be loyal to you as an employee? Would you rather that they feel like you don't care about them? Because that's what you're going to get. And that's a big deal. We didn't have to terminate anybody in my company when the pandemic hit, not one person. And that is not how a lot of other companies had to deal with things. Our people excelled, but you got to give them grace. You got to give them a little bit of leeway. This is like such unprecedented time. Like, we don't even know as leaders how to deal with it sometimes. So you have to really make sure that you're taking care of them accordingly.
Thank you so much for touching on that, Shadana. And this may be the last question. If there's any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box or unmute. But one of the questions that I had was, during this time, there's also been a lot of employee turnover, a lot of folks applying for different organizations, which is really exciting as well. But comes the question of, how do you onboard? How do you create employee morale? How do you support people as they're onboarding into this virtual environment? They're going from one Zoom, one email account to another Zoom, another email account. So how do you best support new employees that are coming during this COVID age?
It's hard. especially early on, like last year when it was like first going on. And we hired people during the pandemic. I mean, we hired somebody and his first day literally was like the first week we were out in March. And I was like, ooh, dude, like your first day, we're not here now in the office. And, you know, you were supposed to be here and we're all out of the office. But we made sure that they were still set up for success with everything that they needed to have at home, number one, to be successful in their job. But two, that we still did everything as if we were in the office. That means if we were going to go through a training with them, then we went through a training with them. We were very clear about what they still had to do from an onboarding perspective. HR was there for them if they had questions about anything. We onboarded them from an HR perspective, whether it was benefits, enrollment, all of those pieces. Like, you literally have to do exactly what you would do as if they were sitting in the office. Now, beyond that, you have to also encourage their team to have things that are a little bit more social because they don't have the ability to be social in the office, right? And you want them to feel included. You don't want them to feel like they're new and they're on the outs. So you encourage things like having a happy hour, getting, you know, doing a virtual lunch together. Like I said, those kind of things that will foster some of what you would have had if you were in the office. And when they got the opportunity to go into the office or meet, my teams did. They definitely did. I mean, but I hired people all over the country. I hired people in California. So with them, they couldn't come into the offices, right? They couldn't come to New York, but they did what they possibly could as a team to make sure that those people were included and felt included in things. And when they were together in the locations that they were together in, then they took those first times, and a lot of them were meeting, and I wasn't even aware that they were all getting together and having drinks and going to a bar and having dinner or being in a park when it was not like something you could go indoors in, and sitting, you know, 10 X amount of feet apart. And people did that. People actually still did those things as long as they felt comfortable. And those that didn't, we didn't make them feel bad for not feeling comfortable. You know, as a leadership team, the CEO invited us out and it rained. So it ended up being in her apartment. And that was really early on in the pandemic. And that was like you're in an enclosed space versus outside. And we had to we had to be okay with those who didn't choose to go because they didn't feel comfortable. And we were okay with that. And those who went, we had a fabulous time, you know? So you have to encourage those things for new hires, for them to feel good about it. So that as if they were in the office. Do as much as you possibly can so that they don't feel that they're not in the office space. And when they can get together, encourage the getting together. Make sure that they have a budget to be able to get together and they don't feel like, oh my God, I can't do it because I can't afford it. Make sure that those things happen.
Absolutely. And it takes a lot of intentionality and thought to be able
Correct.
to continue to do that. So thank you so much for touching on that. And also, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. I learned a lot. I hope that the audience has learned a lot as well. If you want to look back at the recording, this will be uploaded on YouTube by next week. So please look us up, Arts Business Collaborative at YouTube. If you would like to sign up for the Help Desk newsletter, learn more sessions to come, or additional resources such as technical support for ESD grants, please visit us online at www.artsbusinesscollaborative.org. We have a session coming up tomorrow. This will be at 3 p.m. EST, and it'll be an open office hour with Amanda Figueroa, co-founder of Brown Art Inc., who will be our expert on brand, image, and design. You can sign up using the Zoom link that is on the Help Desk homepage, or if you would like more direct links, you can email me at ami@Arts Business Collaborative. We hope you have a great rest of your evening, and I'm looking forward to supporting and connecting with you all soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.